It was a cold evening in New York City, and the streets buzzed with their usual chaos, honking cars, flashing billboards, and hurried pedestrians. Inside a lavish penthouse overlooking Central Park, Nathan Sinclair sat in his leather armchair, sipping a glass of whiskey. He was a man who had everything: wealth, power, and influence. His real estate empire had made him one of the city's richest men. But despite his success, arrogance filled his heart, and he believed love was insignificant compared to wealth. By the fireplace, Olivia stood nervously, twisting the hem of her dress. She had been trying for days to gather the courage to tell him the news, but every time she met his cold, calculating gaze, she lost her nerve. Tonight, however, she couldn't wait any longer. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "Nathan, I have something to tell you," she said softly. Nathan barely acknowledged her, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "Go ahead," he said, his tone indifferent. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, her voice trembling. For a moment, silence filled the room. Nathan placed his glass on the table and turned his gaze toward her, his expression unreadable. Then, instead of joy or excitement, a smirk spread across his face. "Pregnant?" he repeated almost mockingly. "And I'm supposed to believe this child is mine?" Olivia's heart sank. "Nathan, what are you saying? Of course it's yours. We've been married for 3 years. Why would I lie about this?" Nathan abruptly stood up, his towering figure casting a shadow over her. "Don't play innocent, Olivia. My mother warned me about you from the start. She said you were just after my money, and now you're proving her right." Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes. "Your mother has never liked me, Nathan. She always wanted you to marry someone from your social circle. But I loved you for who you were, not for your wealth." Nathan let out a bitter laugh. "Love? Don't make me laugh. I see it now. You think this baby will secure your place in my life, that you'll have a permanent claim to my fortune." Olivia shook her head in disbelief. "I don't want your money, Nathan. I just wanted to share this joy with you. I thought you would be happy." He took a step closer, his face inches from hers. "I don't trust you, Olivia, and I won't let you trap me with a child." Her hands instinctively went to her stomach, as if protecting the life growing inside her. "Nathan, please don't do this," she pleaded. "This is our child." But Nathan had already made up his mind. He pulled a checkbook from his pocket, scribbled a number, and held it out to her. "Take this and leave. You'll never have to worry about money again." Olivia stared at the check, horrified. "You think I can be bought?" she said, her voice breaking. "You think I would trade my child for a piece of paper?" Nathan's face hardened. "If you don't want the money, then leave with nothing. But you're not staying here. Pack your things and get out." The finality in his voice sent a chill down Olivia's spine. She realized then that the man she had married no longer existed, if he ever had. Without another word, she turned and walked to the bedroom, tears streaming down her face. Her hands trembled as she packed a small bag. This was her home, the place where she had built dreams with him, and now she was being thrown out like a stranger. When she stepped out of the room, Nathan was standing by the door, arms crossed. "Don't ever come back," he said coldly. Olivia looked at him one last time, hoping to see even a flicker of regret in his eyes. But there was none. With a heavy heart, she turned and walked out into the freezing night. She had nowhere to go. Her family was in Chicago, miles away, and she had no friends in the city. As she wandered the streets of Manhattan, the neon lights and bustling crowds were a cruel contrast to the emptiness she felt inside. Clutching her stomach, she whispered, "I'll take care of you, my baby. No matter what, I won't let you suffer." As the hours passed, the reality of her situation sank in. She had no home, no money, and no one to turn to. But she had something far more valuable: her determination. She refused to let Nathan's cruelty break her. She would survive. She would raise her child with love, even if she had to do it alone. Little did she know that 20 years later, fate would bring her back to the man who had abandoned her. But this time, the tables would be turned. The wind cut through Olivia's thin coat as she walked the streets of New York City, shivering. The towering skyscrapers, once symbols of excitement and dreams, now felt suffocating. In just a few hours, her entire world had crumbled. The man she had loved and trusted had thrown her out without hesitation. Wrapping her arms protectively around her growing belly, she felt the slight swell of her pregnancy. She had no home, no money, and nowhere to go. The weight of it all was overwhelming, but she refused to break. She had to think. She had to survive. For her child. As the night deepened, Olivia wandered aimlessly, looking for a place to rest. She stumbled into Grand Central Terminal and found a bench in a quiet corner. Exhausted, she sat down, her body aching from hours of walking. Around her, travelers rushed to catch their trains, their lives moving forward while hers had come to a screeching halt. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to block out the noise, but sleep wouldn't come. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since morning, but food required money, and she had none. By morning, she knew she couldn't stay in New York. The city was too expensive, and every street reminded her of Nathan. She needed a fresh start. She thought of her old college friend, Rachel, who lived in Chicago. They had lost touch over the years, but Rachel had always been kind-hearted. It was a long shot, but Olivia had no other options. She made her way to the Port Authority bus terminal, her hands trembling as she approached the ticket counter. The clerk barely looked up. "Next," he called. I need a bus ticket to Chicago," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "One way or round trip?" he asked. Olivia hesitated. A round trip would mean she had a place to return to, but there was nothing left for her in New York. "One way," she murmured. "That'll be $120, the clerk said, tapping at his screen. Olivia's stomach dropped. She had nothing. Absolutely nothing. She stepped aside, her mind racing. She had never begged in her life, but what choice did she have? Taking a deep breath, she approached a middle-aged woman who looked kind. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly. I'm in a really bad situation. I need to get to Chicago, and I don't have the money for a bus ticket. If you could spare anything." The woman's eyes darted away, uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, I can't help," she muttered, walking away quickly. Swallowing hard, Olivia tried again. She asked an elderly man, a businessman in a sharp suit, a young couple holding hands. The responses were the same: pity, avoidance, rejection. Her cheeks burned with shame. She was about to give up when she felt a tap on her shoulder. Rachel remained Olivia's rock, cheering her on during the toughest days. One evening, as she sat in her room folding baby clothes Rachel had bought from a second-hand store, Olivia felt a sudden flutter in her stomach. She froze, placing a hand over the small bump, and then she felt it again, a tiny, unmistakable kick. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "You're really in there, aren't you?" It was the first moment she truly felt connected to her baby, and it filled her with a love so strong it drowned out all the pain Nathan had caused. Meanwhile, across the country, Nathan Sinclair continued his life of luxury in New York, completely unaware of the woman he had discarded. His business empire had only grown, his name appearing in Forbes articles and finance magazines. Women came and went, none lasting long enough to matter. He had convinced himself that he had done the right thing, that Olivia had been nothing more than a mistake. He never once wondered about the child he had abandoned. But fate had its way of bringing people back together, and Nathan had no idea that 20 years later, Olivia would walk back into his life, not as the broken woman he had left behind, but as someone far stronger than he could have ever imagined. Olivia's life in Chicago had transformed in ways she never imagined. Months turned into years, and she built something stable, not just for herself, but for her son, Daniel. From the moment he was born at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, she knew she had a purpose greater than any pain Nathan had inflicted on her. Holding him in her arms for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapped around hers, she made a silent promise. She would never let him feel abandoned the way she had. The early years were the hardest. Olivia worked long hours, sometimes double shifts at the diner, while also completing her training as a medical office assistant. Rachel remained by her side, helping care for Daniel when Olivia's schedule became overwhelming. Some nights, Olivia would come home exhausted, her body aching, but the moment she saw her baby's sleepy smile, everything felt worth it. By the time Daniel was 5, Olivia had secured a full-time job at a pediatric clinic in Lincoln Park, finally leaving the diner behind. It was a small victory, but a significant one. The steady paycheck meant she could afford a better apartment, a tiny but cozy 2-bedroom space in a safe neighborhood. Life was still far from easy, but it was stable. She made sure Daniel had everything he needed: books, warm clothes, and even little treats from time to time. Olivia rarely thought about Nathan. In the early days, she had moments of anger, times when she wondered if he ever regretted what he had done. But as years passed, she realized that dwelling on him was a waste of energy. He had chosen to erase them from his life, and she had chosen to build a new one. Daniel grew into a bright and compassionate boy. He had Olivia's dark hair and determined spirit, but his sharp blue eyes were unmistakably his father's. Olivia never hid the truth from him. She told him that his father had left before he was born, that he was a powerful businessman in New York, but she never spoke with bitterness. "Some people make choices they can't undo," she would say, "but that doesn't define who you are." Daniel never asked much about Nathan. To him, his mother was his whole world. He admired her strength, her resilience, and the way she always managed to smile no matter how tired she was. By the time Daniel turned 18, he had become everything Olivia had dreamed of: a responsible, ambitious young man with a sharp mind and a heart full of kindness. He had been accepted into Columbia University, a moment that filled Olivia with both pride and fear. Letting him go was the hardest thing she had ever done, but she knew he deserved the best opportunities. On the day she dropped him off in New York City, she hugged him tightly, whispering, "Go make your mark on the world, my love." He promised to call every day, and as she watched him disappear into the crowd of students, she felt both the weight of her sacrifices and the beauty of what they had built together. Meanwhile, Nathan Sinclair's life had taken a different path. His success in real estate had reached new heights, making him one of the wealthiest men in New York. But success had come at a cost. Over the years, he had married twice, both times ending in bitter divorces. He had children from both marriages, but they barely spoke to him. His empire had given him wealth beyond measure, but no real happiness. He had always dismissed the past, burying memories of Olivia deep within him, believing that what he had done had been necessary. He told himself he had moved on, that she was nothing more than a chapter he had closed long ago, but fate had its own plans. One evening, as Daniel walked through Manhattan, excited about his new life, he found himself in front of a massive skyscraper with the name Sinclair Enterprises plastered in bold letters. He had heard the name before. His mother had mentioned it when he was younger. Curiosity burned within him, and for the first time in his life, he felt an overwhelming urge to know more about the man who had abandoned them. With a racing heart, he pulled out his phone and began searching for information. Article after article painted the image of a ruthless businessman, a man admired for his wealth, but criticized for his lack of empathy. As Daniel scrolled through images of Nathan Sinclair, he felt an unsettling mix of emotions. This was the man who had chosen power over family, a man who had walked away without looking back. That night, Daniel called Olivia. "Mom," he said carefully, "do you ever wonder if he regrets it?" There was silence on the other end. Olivia knew exactly who he was talking about. She took a deep breath before answering. "Maybe," she said softly. "But I stopped wondering a long time ago." Daniel didn't respond right away. His mother had moved on, but something inside him needed closure. He didn't know what he was looking for: a confrontation, an apology, or simply an acknowledgement that he existed. Over the next few weeks, he researched everything he could about Nathan Sinclair. The more he learned, the more conflicted he felt. His father had built a kingdom, but at what cost? Stories of failed marriages, estranged children, and ruthless business dealings painted a picture of a man who had everything but seemed to have nothing at all. One afternoon, while walking near Wall Street, Daniel made a bold decision. Daniel Carter stepped into the towering Crawford Enterprises building, his heart pounding. The receptionist, a well-dressed woman in her 40s, looked up. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "No," Daniel admitted. "But I need to see Mr. Crawford. It's important." The woman raised an eyebrow. "And who are you?" Daniel hesitated for only a second before saying the words that had been stuck in his throat for years. "I'm his son." Daniel's mother sighed softly. "Closure doesn't come from other people, Daniel. It comes from within. James was never going to give you anything you didn't already have." Daniel closed his eyes, letting her words sink in. "You were right about him. About everything." There was silence on the other end before she replied. "I never wanted to be right about this, sweetheart. I would have given anything for him to be the father you deserved." His chest tightened. "You were enough, Mom. You always were." A soft sniffle came through the line, and he knew she was holding back tears. "Thank you, baby. That means more than you know." They talked for a while longer, reminiscing about old memories, laughing at stories from his childhood. By the time they hung up, Daniel felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Maybe he hadn't found the closure he had been searching for, but he had discovered something even more valuable: the realization that he had never truly been alone. As the days passed, he poured himself into his work. As a financial analyst at a small firm, he was far from the wealth and power his father wielded, but he was proud of the life he had built. He had worked hard for everything he had, without shortcuts or handouts, and that was something James Crawford could never take away from him. One afternoon, while grabbing coffee near Wall Street, he ran into an old college friend, Michael. They hadn't spoken in years, but after catching up, Michael mentioned a business opportunity, an investment startup looking for sharp minds like Daniel's. At first, Daniel hesitated. He had a stable job and a steady paycheck. But the idea of building something from the ground up, of proving to himself that he could succeed on his own terms, was enticing. After a few sleepless nights, he took the leap. He quit his job and joined Michael's startup, throwing himself into long hours and endless meetings. The work was exhausting, but fulfilling. He was building something real, something untethered to his past or his father's name. Months turned into a year, and Daniel found himself thriving. The startup secured funding, expanded rapidly, and he built a reputation, not as James Crawford's son, but as Daniel, a self-made man. One evening, while preparing for a major investor meeting, he received an unexpected email. It was from a journalist writing a feature about successful entrepreneurs with unique backgrounds. The email mentioned James Crawford, hinting that the journalist knew about Daniel's connection to him. His stomach twisted at the thought of his past being dragged into the spotlight. He stared at the screen, debating whether to respond. Finally, he took a deep breath and typed a reply. I have no connection to James Crawford. My story is my own. And for the first time, he truly believed it. Despite his success, a quiet restlessness lingered inside him. No matter how much he accomplished, part of him still carried the wounds of his past. Success hadn't erased the years of abandonment, the sleepless nights his mother had endured, or the unanswered questions that had haunted him. He had fought so hard to distance himself from James Crawford, yet the man's existence still had a hold over him. One evening, after a long meeting, Daniel wandered through Central Park, lost in thought. As he debated calling his mother, his phone vibrated with an unknown number. He normally ignored such calls, but something compelled him to answer. Hello? He said cautiously. There was a pause before a deep voice responded. Daniel. His breath caught in his throat. He knew that voice, older, rougher, but unmistakable. James Crawford. Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. How did you get my number? James sighed. I have my ways. I figured it was time we talked. A bitter laugh escaped Daniel's lips. You figured? After 20 years, now is the right time? I know I don't deserve a warm welcome, James admitted, his tone subdued. But I saw the article about your company. You've done well for yourself. Daniel clenched his jaw. I did it without you. I know. There was a pause. Look, I don't expect you to care, but I'm not in the best shape these days. Health-wise. A wave of conflicting emotions surged through Daniel. Part of him wanted to tell James he didn't care, but another part, the part that still sought answers, couldn't ignore the gravity in his father's voice. What do you want? He asked coldly. To see you, James said simply. One conversation. That's all I'm asking. Daniel hesitated. Every instinct told him to walk away, but something about the way James sounded unsettled him. This might be his only chance to get the closure he had been chasing his entire life. Fine, Daniel said. One conversation, but I choose the place. They arranged to meet the next evening at a quiet Manhattan restaurant. When Daniel arrived, he spotted James sitting at a corner table. The man looked different, thinner, his face lined with age and something deeper. Regret, perhaps. Daniel sat across from him, his expression unreadable. So, talk. James exhaled. I've made a lot of mistakes. I won't make excuses. But leaving you and your mother, that was the worst one. Daniel scoffed. You don't get to say that now. You had 20 years to fix it. James nodded. You're right. And I don't expect forgiveness. But I do want to explain. He spoke of his fears, his selfish choices, how he convinced himself that leaving was best. Daniel listened, emotions swirling inside him. He had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing had prepared him for the raw honesty in James's voice. Why now? Daniel finally asked. Why reach out after all this time? James hesitated before pulling back his sleeve, revealing a hospital bracelet. Stage 4 cancer. Doctors say I have months, maybe less. Daniel's heart pounded. He had spent his life hating this man, resenting him for the pain he caused. And now, James Crawford was dying. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, in a whisper, he asked, "What do you want from me?" James met his gaze. Not money, not pity, just a chance to know my son before it's too late. Something inside Daniel cracked. He didn't know if he could forgive James. He didn't even know if he wanted to. But walking away wouldn't erase the past. The following weeks blurred as Daniel visited James more often. Their conversations deepened. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was something. When he told Olivia, she hesitated but didn't stop him. She had made her peace long ago. One evening, as Daniel sat by James's hospital bed, his father looked at him with tired but peaceful eyes. "I never got to be your father. But in these last few weeks, you gave me a chance to be something close." Daniel hesitated, then reached out and squeezed James's hand. It was the closest thing to forgiveness he could offer. 2 days later, James Crawford passed away. In his will, he left everything to Daniel, not just his wealth, but his personal journals and unsent letters. At first, Daniel didn't know what to do with it all. But as time passed, he read through the pages, understanding his father in ways he never had before. Standing in his office, looking out at the city, Daniel realized something. He wasn't running anymore. He was moving forward, not in defiance of his past, but in acceptance of it.